All right. Well, thank you very much, folks, for jumping on. I really appreciate it. It's probably going to be easier if y'all don't mind muting yourselves and probably even turning your cameras off if you can. If you can't, no big deal. We would just ask that you guys, if you have questions, there's a chat section or a comment section. By all means, share anything you have, and then we'll spend some time at the end answering any questions or talking deeper about anything that we need to. So just in a quick welcome, I really appreciate everybody taking some time. I know everybody's crazy busy. There's a ton going on, but y'all are here, and we greatly appreciate that. Melody and I, this is a passion project that we've been working on for years, and we're super excited to share with you. We share locally, so our office is in Gilbert, Arizona, and we try and do these events monthly where we share kind of the heart of our nonprofit and what we're doing and why we're doing it and the impact that we're having. And the cool thing is we're having touches around the entire country, but we're running it right out of our office here in Gilbert. And so that's what we're doing tonight. And now we're doing it uniquely different. We're doing virtual, which it's 2023. You'd think we would embrace this, but we've been a little slow to embrace it. But we're here tonight. So thank you all for being here and being present and carving out some time. I know everybody's got a lot going on. And with the time zones, we've got New Jersey represented, Wisconsin, Michigan. So it's pretty cool. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. So I'm going to share a little bit about me. And what this evening will look like is I'm going to ultimately share what we are doing at the Compassion Alliance. And then I'm going to share my story of vulnerability and my story of asking for help and what that looked like. And then Melody's going to share her perspective of what it was like being married to a cop for 20 years and the impact that that had, the good and the bad, because there was some good that came out of it. There was a lot of good that came out of it. Everything that we're talking about tonight isn't bad. There's some ugly parts, and that's just part of the reality of modern day law enforcement, but that's okay. We're excited to share with you and give you a glimpse into what that looked like for us. So I retired out of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office 5 years ago now. I retired in 2018. I spent the vast majority of my career in investigations, and I spent my last 11 years out of our homicide unit. And that's the unit that I retired out of. And that was a rough decade of work. And sometimes you're too close to the forest, you don't see the trees. This was a shining example of that. I was a really good homicide cop, and the reality is those front lines got to me. And at that time, there wasn't a safe place that I knew of to reach out for help. And so I didn't. I elected to just retire and go get some help. And it was a game changer. And we'll talk about that process here tonight. But we don't want guys to have to do that and gals to have to do that. We want you to be able to get the help you need while you're working. And quite frankly, had I got the help I needed, I probably would have still worked. Well, I'd be gone now because my 5 years would have been up if I decided to drop. But I didn't. I moved on because I needed to move on. But when I was in that homicide unit, I worked everything. I worked active homicides, cold case homicides, or unresolved cases. And then I finished out my career in the unidentified human remains world. And that's a subject matter that I'm super passionate about. I believe that everybody came into this world with a name, and they deserve the dignity to leave this world with a name. I don't care what they look like. I don't care how you vote. I don't care about your criminal history. I care that you don't have a name. And it's unique for us in Arizona because we have an international border. So our numbers are going to be higher. But there's so many cases, and these are heart-wrenching cases because they're not all criminal. As a matter of fact, a lot of them are not criminal in nature on these types of cases. It's people that succumb to the environment, and there's nobody to report them missing. There's nobody to look for them, and they're really heart-wrenching. So I got to spend a good chunk of my career working those types of cases. And then in retirement, I got picked up by the National Criminal Justice Training Center. And that's a pretty cool opportunity where I get to teach on things that I'm still passionate about. And I'm blessed to work with some amazing individuals. I humbly went into this thinking, I know a little bit, and I realized I know nothing compared to these amazing instructors and the decades of knowledge that they bring to the table. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly getting better by the men and women that I'm working with. So that's a great opportunity to pour back into local law enforcement on subject matters that I care deeply about. But I'm not doing those 100-hour work weeks anymore, or those crazy hours or schedules. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about mental wellness. And our goal is to chip away at the stigma associated with our men and women asking for help. The reality is we got men and women that are out there on the roads right now tonight that need help, and they're still not in a safe place where they can ask for it. I'm a dinosaur. I've been doing this for a while. I'm no longer a reserve as of last month. So it's been 25 years that I've been a cop, and I'm officially a free, liberated man. So I can humbly stand before you and talk about all this stuff. I don't work for an agency. I don't represent any law enforcement entities. I represent the Compassion Alliance, and I represent my wife and our family and our marriage. So it's a much safer place where I can talk about this. But I want you to think about these images that you're looking at as we talk about some of these stats that we're going to share with you tonight. And what does that look like? What is it? How does that resonate with you? But let's start here. What is the Compassion Alliance? Well, first of all, we're a safe place. It's really important to Melody and I that we create a safe place. When I needed help and I was at my darkest hour on my darkest day, I didn't know where to reach out. And I sure didn't know of a safe place. Now, I'm not saying there weren't any, I'm just saying I didn't know of any. And that's first and foremost what we are, is we're a safe place. We advocate for first responders. And how we define a first responder, that is, if you were to call 911, who could potentially show up at your doorstep? That's a police car, a fire truck, or an ambulance. You're going to get one of the three. Now, we expand on that. We obviously cover, telecommunications. We cover crime scene, any peripheral aspect of those entities. But what they do is not normal. And I just want everybody to kind of pause and think about that. Y'all are blessed. If you're not in that first responder world, you've never really thought about this or spent much time on it, but it's not normal. What I saw in that 11 years in homicide was not normal. There are images that I saw in cases that I worked that if I elected to share that with you, I promise it would make the toenails on your feet curl. And I won't share that with you. I won't share any details with you because you all have your own trauma and you don't need the images of my trauma to pollute your mind. What the military is doing is great. They've come a long way. Now, they still have a long ways to go, but at least the military's having these conversations on mental wellness for their troops. We're not having it. It's not the forefront of the conversations in our first responder worlds. There are some agencies that are better than others. Traditionally, fire departments are better than police departments. There are parts of the country that are more receptive to these conversations. But as a whole, we are still light years behind where we need to be on this. And this is a hot topic. Like this cop world, I know intimately. I lived my entire adult life in my professional world, and there's still dudes and gals that I respect deeply that aren't going to have this conversation, and they can't have this conversation. And I'm okay with that. I was in that world, 10 years on, really even 15 years on, I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And I wasn't going to have this conversation with you. It was towards the end of that career where I realized I needed to. And so now I'm having that conversation, but I'm in a safe place where I can have it. I've been redeemed, I've been fixed, I've been made whole again, and it's much easier for me to have this conversation, but it's a super hot topic, and I just want you to know that for your friends that are still on the front lines. They may or may not be receptive to what you're listening to tonight, and that's okay. The cool thing is you guys are here and that you are listening, and we appreciate that. So how do we do what we do? First of all, we're a 501c3, so we're a registered nonprofit. We're registered in the United States. Right here in Gilbert, Arizona. We're apolitical on everything we do. I don't care how you vote. You shouldn't care how I vote. What we should both care about are the needs of our first responders in any community across the country, period. I think politics are polluting the water of too many conversations, and they're not going to pollute the water of the Compassion Alliance and what we're trying to do. We are humanitarian focused. The reality is I just want to do the right thing. We've had some unique opportunities with local entities needing some help, and we've been able to get very creative on just doing the right thing at the end of the day on how we do that. We don't have to deal with bureaucratic red tape. We just get to make the right decision for the right person at the right time, and that's really important to us. And we do this one conversation at a time. We do that through these presentations. We do it through podcasts. We do it through speaking engagements we get. It's literally one conversation at a time. My goal is when you leave here tonight, there's going to be some things you're chewing on that you never knew about, and probably some statistics that we'll share. And that's going to be something that's going to champion a conversation between you and a neighbor, a first responder, family member, or a community that you just didn't know much about until tonight. And we've done multiple podcasts. It is absolutely crazy the reach that a podcast has. It's unbelievable. We single-handedly got into Texas on a podcast that we did, and that spread like wildfire. Texas is one of the biggest states. It is the biggest state that we help. Texas and Arizona compete. And it's all because of podcasts that got shared over there, and then it spread like wildfire. It's a pretty cool opportunity. So how do we do this? So it's really important to me when somebody reaches out for help. I shared with you earlier that we're a safe place. That's really, really important. I want folks to know when they reach out that they matter to us, and we're going to follow through with what we say, and we're going to make immediate contact. When our first responders want help, they want help now. When I wanted help, I needed help now. Don't put me on a back burner. Don't return my call or my email in a week or even 72 hours. It's important to us that we make touch the same day for anybody that seeks help through our website. It's really, really important. And I'll ask them, look, if you're in Arizona, I'm going to ask you, give me 24 hours. We have enough vetted therapists here in the state, that we can get you placed in 24 hours. If you're asking us for help in a state we're not currently operating in, I ask you for 72 hours. And that gives me the opportunity to go to bat for you and to figure out who we can send you to vet that therapist and negotiate our pricing with that therapist. And I can do it quickly. As soon as I make contact, I usually can get it done that same day. Sometimes we need 24 hours. But I ask for 72 so that we can have time to get placed on what's going on. There's been a few occasions too where I've needed more than the 72 hours, and we just stay in contact with that first responder. Say, look, I've got multiple feelers out. I haven't heard back from anybody yet. Give me an extra day or two. We'll follow up with you. The unique thing is we get a lot of requests around the holidays. Pretty much every holiday we get requests for help. And that's always an obstacle when we're trying to get somebody help with schedules and everything like that. But these men and women are pretty hurting, and I feel like they're just relieved knowing that somebody's going to bat for them and is willing to fight for them, that they're like, take as much time as you need. If you need an extra week, take it. So that makes it helpful that our men and women that reach out are very receptive to what we're doing. And we assure the first responder that we're in this together. If we have any first responders that we've helped on this call, you know that it's really important that when I'm making contact with you, that I'm letting you know, usually in that email, we're in this together. It's really hard for our men and women to reach out for help, first of all. Again, I speak from firsthand experience. It is so difficult, I will share with you, that we don't even answer the phone anymore because those are just brutal conversations. And then the first responder is felt justifying the need for help. And it puts us in an awkward position. And so we don't answer the phone. They leave a voicemail. We get back to them right away. It's a much smoother process, and nobody feels like they have to justify the need for help. I take that right off the table when I make contact with our first responders. They don't owe me an explanation. If you're a first responder and you're wearing a badge somewhere and you need help, you need help as far as I'm concerned. You owe us and our organization zero justification. That's really important to us. So we only pay for the services. We're not involved with the treatment. We write a lot of checks to cover that treatment, but we don't get involved with the day-to-day operations. That's not my wheelhouse. And quite frankly, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I don't want to know all those details. It's none of my business. I got my own trauma that I'm dealing with. I don't need to know everything going on with every first responder. They want them to have that privacy with their therapists. I'll even ask them in those emails. Once I make the introduction, I ask them, remove me, and you guys go direct. I don't need to be involved with this. I'm here solely to write a check and to pay for your treatment and to take that financial strain off your shoulders. We share zero details. And I'm going to share zero details with you. I might share with you guys states that we're in. I have no problem with that, but we're not going to talk agencies, specifics on people or anything like that. It's really, really important that our first responders know that they have our trust, and that comes with creating the safe place. So we don't talk openly about who we're helping, what agencies, organizations, any of that. We're just not going to. We share our rules when I introduce our first responder. So what I'll do is I'll introduce that first responder through email to a vetted therapist, and then I share our rules. And our rules are really simple. We're not an open ATM. I'm not paying the first responders. We'll pay the therapists. I'm not going to pay for late fees. The first responder has to have some skin in the game. If they no show on an appointment, that's on them to pay those late fees. It's not going to be on us. We'll pay for the completed therapy. And then we take a back seat. I don't want to get involved or in the way of getting them healed with those therapists. So we just take a back seat. Now, I assure them we're always available. If you need something, just reach out. But we're not going to be checking on them. We're not going to be doing much. We're going to let them go do what they got to do. We do a lot of in-person therapy. I feel like most of our first responders at this stage in the game, they want in-person therapy. COVID was unique. COVID was unique for all of us. We were only doing online at that point. We still do a little bit of online, but a lot of what we do is in person. And it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what state you're in. We're going to find you a therapist that can meet you in person. If we can't, we have some backup plans that are fully virtual. And we've had to use that in a couple instances where we just can't find a vetted, qualified therapist that can handle a first responder in a certain state. Then we'll have to go to this backup plan. It happens very rarely, but it's a tool in our tool belt that we have had to use occasionally. So I'm going to transition and share a little bit about PTSI, or you've heard of PTSD. That's a hot topic too. I tend to quantify it as post-traumatic stress injury. I believe it's an injury that you could be healed from. I'm a shining example. I was injured. I went and got help. I made a full recovery. I think our men and women can absolutely do that when they get the help that they need. But if you look at this stat for the last several years, we've lost more firefighters and police officers to suicide over line of duty deaths. That stat should be a sobering stat that just kind of stops you in your tracks if you think about it. That basically says that there's a higher likelihood of you taking your own life for our first responders than there is for being killed in the line of duty. That stat hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. We're seeing those trends going that direction. It's absolutely sobering, and I'd be willing to bet most of you probably didn't know that. I know my law enforcement friends did that are in that field, but the general public doesn't know that. But they need to know that. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why we're spending an evening talking about this. That's why Melody and I care deeply about our first responders, because of that statistic alone right there. We partner with multiple trauma therapists across the country that specialize in PTSI. Now, I used to think we had to find therapists that only work with first responders. We don't. And those are purple unicorns. You can find them, but they're hard to find. We care about trauma therapists that value first responders. And it's as simple as that. And there's tons of them out there. And to be fair, there's some that don't, but we don't waste our time with them. We're really quick to weed those out in the vetting process. And I will stand behind any one of our trauma therapists throughout the country. We have some amazing individuals who care deeply about our first responders, and they're in awesome positions to be able to help these men and women out of some pretty dark places. We operate solely off donated funds. There is no bank of the Compassion Alliance. There is no grant that we have currently that's paying for any of these. We get all of our funds from people who care deeply about first responders all over the country, from family trust to private donations to some corporate entities. But it's basically folks like you and me that care deeply about our first responders, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. We're not insurance-based. We're not dependent on insurance. We don't even mess with insurance. When I went to get help, I didn't want insurance. I didn't want a paper trail. I paid cash. I didn't want anybody knowing what I'm doing. That's how we operate. I'm not interested in insurance whatsoever. We're never going to go down that road. It's nobody's business but this first responder and their family. That's all that really matters to us. So we're never going to open up that insurance door. I shared with you just recently about some of these stats that are pretty sobering, but I want to also share our divorce rates. They're pretty high in the first responder world. We could get really specific talking about police and fire and where we're at, multiple marriages. And I just want you to know that traditionally, I'll tell you right now, marriage is hard already to begin with. Can I get an amen? And I mean that with the biggest heart. I love my wife to death. We just celebrated 25 years. But it's hard, and we got to work at this every single day. And if your mind's not right, and you're at a place at work where you can't even, get your mind right professionally, how are you going to get your mind right personally? And so a lot of these marriages just get beat up, and kicked around, and the divorces are the victims a lot of the trauma that's going on. And I think it's important that we just know that it's hard for our first responders on these marriages. We just need to know that. And we do a lot of marriage counseling. I guess I should tell you that too. We get a ton of requests for marriage counseling, men and women across the board, all three professions. We're really struggling and hurting on these marriages. So it's important to us that we lean into that and help them however we can. And all of this is just considered part of the job, just part of the job. The stress is normal. It's normal to have a failed marriage. It's normal to be miserable. It's normal to be unhealthy. It's normal to think the world is too people-y. And we want to make a soft approach to say, no, that's okay. Let's start making a change on that. How can we help you and what can we do? So it's really important that we lean into that. And I share that with you so that you know the reality of what some of these statistics look like. So who do we help? I shared with you earlier on how we define a first responder, but we go above and beyond that. So we do include our crime scene folks. We do include telecommunications. I have story after story on telecommunications. I literally have one where she literally, I kid you not, saved my life in a homicide in progress when I was a young deputy on a barricaded guy that we encountered based on information she caught when we came flying into that house. And I had every inclination of my being to breach entry into that residence when we knew there was active shooting going on. But she was able to capture some of what was really going on and prevented me from walking into an ambush. He ultimately killed himself in front of me, but it prevented myself from being killed by him. So I have the utmost respect for telecommunications, our 911 dispatchers. I'm telling you, they are the real first responders. They are the ones taking those initial calls of panic, and they don't get off that call until law enforcement is already on scene. And sometimes they remain on that call, depending on the circumstances of that call. And then they hang up, and then that call rings again, and they're right back on it. So mad respect to our telecommunications folks. We absolutely need them, and we are a safe place for them. And then our spouses, holy cow, and Melody will talk to this this evening, but our spouses are a totally forgotten people class. We have some first responders that are never going to get help, and that's okay. I don't think every first responder needs help. I think a good chunk of them do, but they don't all need help. There are some spouses that are totally left in the dust on some first responders that aren't going to get help. And we're losing marriages left and right because of that. So the Compassion Alliance, we will lean into that. And we will lean into those spouses. So all the services that we offer them to spouses as well, and to spouses as well. And we're seeing an uptick in those numbers too, with spouses on who's requesting assistance from all over the country. I think we even have some friends with the National Police Wives Association with us tonight. They're an amazing organization. We've been blessed to lock arms with them. And those are spouses that we care deeply about and we love on, and they matter to us. There's a lot of, not a lot, but there are some resources out there. Arizona's unique. We have some pretty cool things going on for first responders, but it doesn't cover our spouses. So spouses, you matter to us, and we absolutely cover you. And then our retirees. We've actually seen an uptick in our retirees too. Specifically, like right now, we're seeing another uptick. And these ones break my heart too. These are men and women that have served their entire community for their whole career, and then they ride off into the sunset and boom, they're forgotten about. And they don't have insurance anymore. They don't have the resources at their disposal like they did when they were active. They have nowhere to go, and they're forgotten also, and we will not forget about them. They matter to us, and we will continue to offer our services to those retirees. I should share with you too, when I talk about our services, so right from the get-go, we pay for 5 trauma therapy sessions per first responder and spouse or retiree, and we can go up to 10. And quite frankly, we've gone well past 10 on some that need it, and we've done less than 5 on other ones. But we start at 5, and then we evaluate from there. Well, we don't, that therapist does. And if they need more, we're absolutely going to give them more. So our platform, I'm going to share with you a little bit about our platform. Any opportunity I have to talk about the Compassion Alliance and first responders, we use this platform. It's really important that we talk everything that we do. So we're blessed to do some workplace violence trainings. I cover active shooter, de-escalation, stuff like that. But every platform is first responder based. So You're never going to hear me speak at a corporate event and not talk about first responders and mental wellness and the needs of a first responder. And if an entity was ever to ask me to come to a corporate talk and carve out first responders, then they're not going to get me. So I'm a package deal. If you have me speaking, I'm going to be talking about first responders. And we share with groups, church groups, leaderships groups. I don't care where, any platform I have, we're going to talk about the needs of our first responders. We have some date night things going on. I'll actually share with you that here in a little bit. But collaboration is really important. So you're here tonight and we're talking under the platform of Compassion Alliance, but at the end of the day, I don't care about the Compassion Alliance. Like, this isn't about Melody and this isn't about me. This is about our first responders. So I care about collaborating. I don't care where our first responders go get help. If you're comfortable in your agency, go get help in your agency. If you're comfortable with the family resource that you have and they value first responders, go get help there. We have enough requests coming in. I want you to go wherever you're comfortable and you feel safe. That's really important for me. So again, if you ever have the opportunity to hear us speak, it's never going to be all first responders need to contact us. We have everything figured out. We don't have everything figured out. We're a safe place for first responders. We have the resources in place, but there's a lot of great places just like us that are out there. So go wherever you're comfortable and wherever you have direct contact with somebody. So I'm getting ready to transition out of Compassion Alliance and into my personal story. And I'm going to share this image with you. And I'm going to share, hopefully, I'm going to share audio for this. This is actually a Canadian first responder artist. And that's his website or his Instagram handle. He does amazing work. He's a firefighter in Canada. And this image I can relate to with every fiber of my being. It's powerful if you look at it. It's absolutely powerful. So I'm going to share a voicemail that I got. Hopefully, I'm going to share it. Hopefully, it's going to play. And I don't think we have any lawyers in the audience. But if we do, yes, we have the authority to share this. Now, we've obviously edited out name, phone number, things like that. You don't need all that stuff. I just want you to feel the emotion and the pain in this retiree's voice when he reached out for help. He's going to reference a talk I did. It's a podcast that a family member had shared with him. Okay, fingers crossed that this is going to work. Fingers crossed. You may have to turn your volume up a little bit. I'm going to turn mine up as loud as it'll go. And we'll give it a shot.
Hello, and I'm a retired police officer. And I just watched one of your talks, and I need help. Please give me a call back. God bless you.
So remember, I shared earlier that it's really important that we make immediate contact. I got this voicemail and my heart sunk. My biggest fear is at some point a first responder is going to reach out to us and they're not going to be in a safe place. And there's different rules we have to play by. I don't want to encounter that. But my heart sank on this. I reach out to this gentleman quickly, make contact. I kid you not. As soon as I identify myself, this guy starts praying over me over the telephone. And I'm Crybaby Jones on the call. He's Crybaby Jones on the call. We got nothing communicated in the first 30 seconds. It was an absolute gut wrench. But we were able to provide him the services that he needs. And this all came from a podcast that a family member had shared that just resonated and gave him the strength to reach out. These are the types of individuals that we're dealing with daily, weekly, monthly on the calls that we get, the online requests that we get. They're raw. They're super, super raw of what these men and women are dealing with because they've gone entire careers and they don't have the tools in place to process what they've seen or heard. And now they get a glimpse of hope and they just rawly reach out and leave pretty vulnerable messages. So now we're going to transition into my story. And I'll tell you in full vulnerability, I have not always shared my story. It's been the last year, maybe 2 years, past COVID, that I started sharing it. And I've had a board that's challenged me to share this. I'm in a safe place now. I can share it again. I'm not working anywhere. But they've challenged me to share it because there are men and women that need to hear it and know that there's hope. There's absolutely hope. I'm living proof of the ability to be fixed. So I will reluctantly transition into my story and share with you as raw as I can. And I've done this for a while now, so I'm much more comfortable now. Thank goodness you guys are listening now and not on one of those first ones. And Melody, I see there's a chat comment. If you could also hit that at some point and remind me if I need to come back and answer anything there. So I started this career a pretty young buck, and I joke that that was a few years. The photo on the right is a few years before I retired. And I feel like I fell out of the tree of life and whacked every branch on the way down. And my wife pretty much did not age at all, which is the story of our life. But I joke about the stress of specifically law enforcement, because that's what I know most. But, you know, if you think about our presidents, and this is not political, so I don't care who you vote for, but look at any president that comes into office and look at him 4 years later in the images, and then look at him another 4 years later, 8 years, and what stress does to the human body. I'm telling you right now, stress is going to win if you don't find the tools to overcome some of those deficiencies. And we'll talk through that. But stress is a real problem. So my story is my academy experience was stay alive. Don't do anything stupid. Don't make the agency look like idiots, but stay alive. And they do a really good job of that. I was confident I was going to win every single gunfight and every single fist fight, even if I lost them all. I was confident I was going to win all of those. The academy, when I went through in, you know, mid to late 90s, did a really good job of that. What they didn't help me was between the ears. What they didn't help me was staying alive upstairs on some of the things I was going to see and process. But they did an exceptional job at going out and fighting and winning. I didn't have any tools. And again, this isn't a pity party. This isn't to bash 90s law enforcement. It's just the world that I know and the world that I lived in. I didn't have those tools for what I was going to see. I remember going through the academy in 1997, and I remember our RTOs coming in and giving us the stats of how many people were going to be in an officer-involved shooting and die and things like that. But they never told us once about what we would see. They never told us once about the damage images can do and not having a safe place to talk about things. They never talked about that. So that was never front and center. It was browbeat into us how to fight and win and to stay alive. I like to think there's a little bit different approach now in the academies. And I don't know, it's been a long time since I've been in a police academy, but I have to think they're different now. There was a much older influence as I came onto the job. That dynamic is changing now because of the mass exodus in law enforcement. We're seeing more and more younger tenured troops of rank and seniority with less and less years on, which is an odd phenomenon, one I didn't experience. When I came on, we had some salty dinosaurs that were running the show. I spent the majority of my career in investigations. I did very little patrol work. You know, my 20 years, I did, I don't know, maybe a few years patrol work. Worked all nights, graveyards, loved it. But the vast majority of my career were in investigations. And you know, in the last good chunk of it, the last decade was in homicide, and we were policing our own with the tools that we had. To the best of our ability, we were policing our own. Didn't know much about self-help. To me, self-help was just checking on my partner. We'd go to a horrific scene and then just checking in. Hey, are you okay? That was wild. That sucked. Hope we never have to see that again. Are you okay? Yep. How do you think I answered when anybody asked me if I was okay? Yeah, I'm fine. One word answers. All right, let's go eat. Food solves everything. Let's just go eat, drown our sorrows in some food. But the reality was I wasn't okay. I wasn't fine. I wasn't good. I was pretty damaged inside. The impact on my family on this career was pretty raw, but also it wasn't all bad. Like I'm going to stand before you and tell you I'm the dude I am right now because of being a law enforcement officer. Made me grow up real quick, but it taught me responsibility. It taught me respect. And I wouldn't change that for the world. Don't know that I'd necessarily go into law enforcement right now in 2023, but I've seen a different side of it. The impact of my marriage was I feel like it took a hard toll on my marriage. Well, I know it took a hard toll on my marriage because I didn't want to talk about it. There were things I saw I didn't understand. I sure didn't want to come home and tell Melody about it. I didn't want to damage her. I didn't want to damage my kids. I just wanted to live in my little cocoon and not have to worry about anything or anybody until I had to go back to work. So Melody and I will soon to be 21-year-old twins that are junior year of college. It's crazy. They were young kiddos when we started this. And again, it's not all bad, but my kids didn't have the average childhood. They didn't have the luxury of being able to lie when their old man was a cop. You're not allowed to get away with that. I know body language. I know when you're not being truthful. Does kind of suck for them, but it is what it is. But my kids can also look you in the eye and shake a hand and not give you a limp fish when they're doing it. So I think there is some value that came out of it. I know there's some value that came out of it, but we all grew up together. My kids grew up, my marriage grew up. I grew up as a young adult. This career, I grew up quickly, but our marriage grew. And I also contribute, 25 years, that's a badge of honor that I wear. And it hasn't been easy, but it hasn't been that hard either in the grand scheme of things because we've been smart enough to go get some help and to talk about things and to solicit marriage counselors and to be vulnerable when we need to be vulnerable because this marriage is worth fighting for and this family is worth fighting for. And so we've done that. It hasn't all been pine trees and roses, but it's all been vulnerability and rawness and transparency. And that's the only way I know how to live. And thank God that's the only way my wife knows how to live. And my kids are slowly learning that that's the only thing we bring to the table is just being ourselves. So the reality is in that decade of homicide work, there were things that I saw that I just started questioning, is there really any good out there? Like if you're constantly surrounded by death and destruction and demonic activity, how is there good? And how do you continue to believe that there's good? And it was like Groundhog Day. Like we would go work a homicide and we'd work 100 hours and that week would be crazy. And then we'd get a couple days off and we're back at it the next week and it's a totally different call. But every single day, it was the worst day in the history of that family that we're dealing with. And it's like Groundhog Day. It just repeats over and over again. And my faith took a hit. And this isn't a class on faith, and I'm not going to quietly baptize everybody or transition this into a sermon. But my faith is important to me. And my faith wasn't winning at the darkest hour. And that was a tough place for me to be in. And I'm lucky, full disclosure, I'm standing before you because I have an amazing wife who saw this going on and said, absolutely not on my watch. We're going to get you through this. But I credit her with really being that only hand that was reaching out in my darkest hour saying, let's do this. We're going to be fine. A lot of men and women, they don't have that. They don't have that support at home and they quickly become a statistic. I should, in full disclosure, be a statistic. Based on what I've done and seen. It doesn't have to be horrendous. Doesn't have to be a suicidal statistic. It could be an addiction. It could be a divorce. It could be, a one-parent marriage. It could have been anything, and it doesn't matter. I don't want to dwell on that. The reality is we pulled through it. But I also stand before you and realize I won the lottery of spouses, and not every first responder has that. So I humbly know that. I acknowledge that. But my faith was an integral part of this. And in my darkest hour, when I was challenging my faith and questioning it, I realized that was the tipping point in my life where I realized I have to get help. I have to be receptive to help because if I continue to go down this road, I don't know where it's going to end up. And I don't know what the end result's going to look like. So when I'm in that dark spot, I'm having these negative thoughts and I'm second guessing everything. Like literally, did I do enough? Was I a good enough dad? Was I a good enough husband? So my world was, I missed a whole lot working in that homicide world, a lot of holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, social functions. And I started just kind of second guessing everything. And when you're already not in a great place, constantly second guessing is not a great place to be. And I started questioning myself, was I broken? So broken is a hot topic for me. I don't even like the word, although we do use it on some marketing. A A lot of people can relate to the word broken, but I wasn't broken. I was bent. I was seriously bent. I was tweaked. I was to the point of being snapped in half, but I was not broken. I was bent. And a lot of our first responders fall into that category. They're not broken. You're totally fixable. I want you to know that for our friends that are joining us. You're not broken. You're just a little tweaked. You're a little bent, and we can absolutely help you. But this was my biggest one. Was I a burden on my family? Did I make the right call? Did I make the right decision? So I'm here to share with you. And I bleed County Brown. I bleed the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. That is an agency that I care deeply about. That is an agency that I gave a lot of years of my life to. But guess what? Your agency will move on without you. When you retire, when you move on, the big machine still gets oiled and still rolls forward with or without you. I thought that I had to be a part of this. I thought that I had to give all my time and every resource I had to the agency that I worked for. You don't have to. I want you to know that for our first responders, and it's no dig on your agency. But in the grand scheme of things, they're going to move on without you, and they need to. These agencies need to move on without you. People transfer, people retire. Unfortunately, people die. There's a lot of crazy things that go on. These agencies can't be attached to a handful of people. We'll keep moving on. I didn't see that for a while, and I started second guessing a lot of that. My agency stuff that I did I do enough? And the family one was absolutely huge. I was super closed off. I'm much better now. I'm not great. I think I'll always have a little part of, I'll always wear some scars from law enforcement. The reality is I'll always have some visible scars, but they're not open, festering wounds anymore. They've been addressed, they've healed, but they're still visible. You can't have a conversation with me for a very long time and not hear some part of my heart for that world that I care deeply about and that profession that I care deeply about. But I'd rather be alone. I'm much, much better now. But in the thick of it, I wanted to just be by myself. I didn't want to go to the kids' games. I didn't want to go to a family dinner. I didn't want to go to a party. The world was way too peoply. Melody makes fun of me for that word, but I use it much, much less now. The world is not quite as peoply in retirement. But I just wasn't present at all. When I did get help, and that help came from Melody. So what that looked like is Melody saying, look, at about 15 years on, 16 years on, she's like, I think you probably need to talk to somebody. And I was a hard no on that. I'm like, nope, ain't gonna happen. I'm fine. And then we would talk again. And then when I got to like 3-4 years, about 3 years out, I'm like, yeah, I probably need some help. But I wasn't willing to go get help. I wasn't willing to ask for help. 2 years out, she's like, yeah, if you need help. I said, babe, I'm got an exit plan. I'm gone in 2 years. Let me just retire and I'll go get help. 1 year, let me retire and I'll go get help. And again, the sheriff's office probably would have been super receptive and probably would have got me the help I needed, but I elected not to ask for help. I come from that dinosaur breed. I didn't want to show any kinks in my armor. I elected not to. I retired kind of at the stroke of midnight on my 20th year, went out nice and quietly, just like I came in, no fanfare, no parties at the office, no mass emails. But I was also in a pretty broken state when I left. And I went and got help. And I'm telling you, it was an absolute game changer. And it got me thinking, why? Why did I have to wait? Why didn't I listen to Melody 4 years ago, 3 years ago? My agency didn't need to know. Nobody needed to know. We could have just went and got help quietly. My story is in retirement, I went and did EMDR. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it was a game changer. I shared with you earlier, I had some images. I had a handful of images that I was just parking on. It wasn't necessarily ruining my day. I was still functional. I was still moving around, but I was spending way too much time thinking about it. I go through EMDR, and they train your brain to reprocess how you think about a few things. So some of those images, and again, I'm not sharing any images with you. You don't need that. You have your own images, but it reprograms my brain. So now the images never go away, but I'll think about it and go, yeah, that sucked. Moving on. It's an absolute game changer for me. And I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So what did that look like as I went through that? I'm going to share with you a little bit. There's sensory devices. I went through it, holding devices. My therapist would walk me through those images. And I would react to those images, and these devices would train my brain. This is the non-therapist version, to process through that. And it was a game changer. I had very limited sessions with it. We were able to get through it quickly. I'm an exception to the rule. That doesn't normally happen. Normally, you're going through multiple sessions. And it built up my confidence. So when I went through this, I had very broken confidence. I was very scared to damage my therapist. I'm like, I cannot possibly share what I'm seeing in those images because it will absolutely break the therapist. I knew it would break my wife if I shared the detail. And I knew there was a good chance it would break my marriage if I shared the details. And Melody wanted the details. She wanted to be a strong place for me, but I was not going to allow myself to do that. And I learned through Dina Charter with EMDR transformations that the trauma therapists that handle these, they are our first responders. There's nothing I could say to my therapist. Well, first of all, she had the best poker face on the face of the planet that rivaled mine. But there's nothing I could have shared with her that would have scared her, that would have intimidated her, that would have damaged her. And the cool thing is, what I learned is all these trauma therapists, they have their own tools. They have their own therapists. They have all these things that we don't. And I got to stop. I got to stay in my travel lane. I know cop work. I don't know how healing works. And so I had to trust this organization, and they did a phenomenal job. And that really, the Compassion Alliance was born out of this. We want men and women to know that we are a safe place and that we have the resources in place to get them help, and they don't have to go through this by themselves at all. The benefits of a first responder is they are not broken. I shared with you that earlier. I'm going to pause on this. I'm going to highlight that for my first responders listening. You absolutely are not broken. You're just a little tweaked. You're a little bent. You're a little burned. You're a little scarred, but you are absolutely not broken. You are fixable. By the time a first responder asks for help, they're ready for help. Very type A, ready to go. By the time I asked for help, I was ready to go. That's why when I shared earlier, we make contact immediately. We don't put them on the ice. A lot of them are type A, although I think Melody and I are both type A, which is interesting for a marriage, but we've survived. But a lot of them are type A, really good at following directions. They're going to do what they're told. They're receptive to the tools that are being shared with them. That's really important. They're ready to rock and roll and use that. So I am going to transition over to Melody, my bride. And if I stop sharing, Melody, are you able to take over, or do I need to share for you?
No,
Okay.
I should be able to share once you stop sharing.
Okay, so bear with me because my mouse went to sleep. Okay, stop sharing, and the floor should be yours, babe. I mean, Melody, the floor should be yours.
Let's see. Are we good? Thumbs up.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
we're good.
All right. So I'm going to kind of share from my point of view everything. And thank you, Tony. That was great, because I still love listening to you, and just how it gives us, it refuels the fire of why we do this. But Tony and I literally got married, and I started medical school and he started the police academy. And so busy and stress literally became our new norm. We didn't know really anything else. And our schedules were opposite, starting immediately, where he was really doing nights. And so we were learning how to do all of this really without each other. What I saw as Tony got longer into his career, were the things that started to worry me. There was family impact that he was mentioned about, where he wasn't being able to do the things that we wanted him to do. And at that about 5 years to retirement, I did, what I'm blessed with, and I have some slides on this, is when people found out that his spouse was, his wife was a doctor, they felt comfortable seeing me. And I would recommend, them going and seeking out counseling, that we could do it without their agency if they didn't want to. You could pay cash. Some places had back doors, so nobody would recognize you. They would take my advice, yet my husband didn't take my advice at the time. And so it was hard at first, because I saw that things were going on, and yet I couldn't do anything for him specifically. But I was very thankful that other first responders, whether fire or EMS, they felt comfortable coming and seeing me, and that I would understand that world that they lived in. So there were some frustrations there. He lived in a very black and white world, medicine, family, very gray world. So that was sometimes hard to get through. And his answers started to get more short. He became more distant. He felt like his back was to the wall. And as he mentioned, he would feel like the world was a little too peoply. And if you know Tony, if you knew him before, him being a cop or before those last kind of 5 years, he's incredibly social. So for me to say all of these things, it's kind of, a lot of people are like, I didn't know this was going on. And that's because it was well hidden. It's not anything that he really wanted to see people see about him now, is that he wasn't the social fun guy. And it was really sad to see him forgetting to see the good in people and in the world. And for sure, he was very fearful of being labeled. He had made an incredible dent in his homicide unit as someone who was very good at what he did, especially when, with cold cases. And he was very afraid of that, that label that could come on, and he had to push, paper and be labeled. So with retirement, I will tell you, he did go get an evaluation, because there was no, I'll do it later. That was the agreement. Tony and I have been blessed. Before we got married, we had to do premarital counseling. The year that we, at our 1-year anniversary, our church made us do another set of counseling. They paired us with someone who had been, married longer than us. And that taught us that you should always have someone that was neutral, that it didn't mean you were broken, didn't mean your marriage was broken. It meant, like, there are things like you get married. I had never lived with anybody, it's you learn these things as you're going. And so having that neutral person was important. And I told Tony, the day you retire, we are making the appointment. There's no ifs, there's not pushing it off. You are. And the world literally seemed more people even after one session. And he started to do things with our family. It took him 2 EMDR sessions, and I literally felt like I had my Tony back. And it had an impact on our family, our marriage, and our friends, because they didn't see it all, but for sure our family and myself really saw the difference within just that first week. It wasn't going to be completely over. He had to figure out what it looked like to be retired, even though he went into, doing reserve work. But it was completely different, not having a desk and being on call and everything. And I love this picture because that was kind of the start of everything, and getting to do a family vacation and really seeing that Tony could go into that deep sleep, that he wasn't tossing and turning. He wasn't up. I knew thoughts were not coming to the forefront of his mind anymore, because he could finally start to relax. And so what is the hardest part about being a spouse of a first responder? Well, knowing that your first responder might not come home. I knew that he would lay his life down for someone else. Think of firefighters running into a burning building. I mean, most people are running out, they're not running in. And same thing, you have an active shooter. Cops are going into that scenario where most people are fleeing. And so I had to know that every day I needed to know what was happening, and that he potentially could lay his life down for someone else. And so I did. I worried about his mental and his physical strength. I worried about his squad. And that's just me being emotional, right? I've learned, I know that it is a squad that would have his back, but I'm not going to lie and tell you I'd never thought, do they have his back? And then I wondered, our kids, they didn't have normal parents, and always wondering, are we going to damage them? The drills that we do, the things that we talk about, are they going to be damaged, or are they going to be, okay? And there were no do-overs. Every single day mattered when he was working. It was incredibly important that we talked, even if things were confusing or hard. We knew that there were no do-overs, and we always wanted to be on a good page with each other. What was the best part? Well, that same flip side, he did serve his community. He still serves his community. And that's really, really special to us. And especially when he started to do unidentified human remains, and like we call them cold cases. It was just amazing for some people to have closure, and that he had passion in that, to that if you come into this world with a name, you should leave this world with a name. And it really was great to see the good in his work, and share stories. So a lot of times I wouldn't always get to know stories unless there was an event or other cops were at our house or people were asking questions. So it was kind of nice to sometimes hear some of the other things that he was doing that, you know, on his day to day, it's not something he comes home and he tells me about. And so I'm not going to share this tonight, but it was a case. Well, I guess I will share it because it was really important. There was a gentleman that went missing in Arizona. And his family thought that he had just up and left him when he was a crop worker. Well, he succumbed to kind of events in California, and I think it's like 30 or 40 years later, Tony is able to give closure to that case. And that family knew that he didn't leave them, that he actually died working in the fields. And so, I mean, what a joy that is to be able to give someone a name and a family their answers. So I loved that he did that work as well. And how did it impact our kids? Well, he kind of shared with you, they couldn't even lie if they wanted to. And so that was pretty hard on them. I think it's pretty easy on them now. It's just, it's that way. And definitely now Tony sees more gray. He helps run my medical practice. Lots of women are in this practice. And so he sees that not everything is black and white. Medicine is not black and white. And we definitely had different talks than most families. Like my kids knew where to sit in a restaurant. They knew how to carry things in a parking lot. You know, there was definitely more talks that we had that most families never even think about. We go way more into detail with stranger danger, but on the flip side, no topic was taboo. And I really feel that our kids were ready for college, where a lot of kids were not ready for college. That's kind of the space that we live in. And they did learn respect and authority. And I love that they can have a conversation with an adult. They can shake your hand. They can remove their hat to say hello. I really appreciate that they learned that from Tony and us. And I do, like I mentioned, they were definitely more prepared for the real world. So I don't think they were too damaged. And we did provide stability. I love that the kids knew that, and they still know. We're not perfect. We'll always work to do things better, but there's always a place at the table to talk and to have conversation. And so I'm going to flip just my hat and kind of move into what it looks like being a physician and caring for our first responders, and why the Compassion Alliance became something that Tony and I wanted to do even more because of what he had been through, what I had been through as a spouse, and then as a physician who treats a lot of first responders. So what we know now is really comes about from post 9/11. 9/11 allowed us to see what acute stress disorder look like. This wasn't, you know, in a military setting. This was done on our soil. And what we understood was just the health conditions secondary to exposure were real. And so studies just exponentially started and have continued and have really helped us to where we're at now on this topic. But 1 in 3 first responders develops a stress disorder versus 1 in 5 in the general public. And really the prevalence in fire and emergency, you're going to see that number on the left. It's huge. And it's pretty much just because of where their position might be. 6 to 34% may have an incident like this, where it's 4% in the general population. But look at the last statistics. 90% of first responders have a traumatic event in their first year. That's crazy. So it's kind of think year after year what they're seeing. And for someone like in investigations like Tony, I mean, that was Groundhog Day every day, where he's going in, you know, to the worst event of a family's life daily. And so this is why I care, and why I love this platform, and I will continue to talk about this, is because the average age of a heart attack for a law enforcement agent is 20 years younger than the general population. So general population about age 65, law enforcement 46. sudden cardiac death is 18 times more likely after the age of 45. And life expectancy, like 20 years, 25 years earlier, they can pass away. And so I want us to care about that and care about their health and taking care of them. And so what's happening here is they are under chronic adrenal stimulation. So that sympathetic nerve of fight or flight doesn't turn off. They're always on call. What happens what happens is their heart rate increases, their blood pressure increases, their stress hormone called cortisol increases. Well, all of that dominoes into insulin resistance. It makes the blood more sticky. Now they're getting more fat buildup. They're having inflammation. They might have a plaque formation. And when that plaque ruptures, and where it lands is the heart or the brain. And so you see heart attack or stroke. And so with PTSD, PTSI, with trauma, what we may see or hear might not be, hey, I just saw, I'm having symptoms of this. We might see instead generalized pain. They're not sleeping. They're starting to have high blood pressure or fast heart rate. They have chest heaviness. They're having gut issues. I mean, there's so many things. And what we really have to do is decipher, is this coming from, are these physical symptoms of something emotionally coming on? But you can also have physical issues that now this is fueling that fire and really bringing them up to the surface. And so we talk about so many different treatment options. And what I love is we are going to talk first and foremost about counseling and supporting their mental health. And we might talk about medications, but no matter what anyone is going through, counseling beats out medication by itself, hands down. And when you put them together, they are incredible. But counseling is the mainstay, and that talk therapy, and whether or not it has something like EMDR assist in that. And so there are different types of medications to help with sleep or the downstream issues initially, like blood pressure, heartburn, tachycardia or fast heart rate. We really incorporate lifestyle changes. Tony Squad knew me as the crazy doc who wanted them to eat well at these scenes. But they needed to eat something quick, and it wasn't always the best thing. But sleep, nutrition, exercise, hydrating, meditation, and breathing are all important. And we'd love to talk about that with them. And then we also talk about ways of supporting their cells, reducing that stress and helping their cells function. Incredibly important, because think about all the years of eating poorly or on the run. They likely have nutritional deficiencies. And so we do want to replace those as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tony, and we can actually, Tony, I'll just leave this screen up and you can kind of talk, and then I can open it up to questions after we stop recording.
Yeah, that sounds great. I will let you, I can't see your PowerPoint though anymore. I see you.
You want me to stop sharing and you can share it then?
If you can just, yeah, give me a second. Let me pull it up here. And I am not able to, I don't think. Oh,
Okay.
hang on. Let's see if I can pull it up. Okay. Bear with me. Well, we're just gonna have to do it this way, I think. Can you see part of that screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to wind it down and just kind of transition and kind of where we go from here. So my goal is, like, what are you taking out of here? I desire that you have this conversation that keeps going with us. I hope there's something that you heard that you can't unhear. And who needs to hear this message? I'm going to beg and plead with you to engage in this, whether it's through social media, whether it's through certain groups, but just keep sharing. Are there groups that we need to talk to? Are there groups that you know about that need to hear what we have? Are there training opportunities with your agency? What does that look like? The thing I want to kind of close with is this date night for our local friends. Snap a photo of it. This is an event that we're holding in October. It's really important that we we kind of lean into these date night opportunities. This is an opportunity where we get to come and bring food and cater dinner and spend an evening with our first responders and spouses talking about all things first responders. This specific event, we're going to talk about love languages and how do we better communicate with our spouse. It's a pretty cool opportunity. It's a rooftop venue. So if this is something that you're interested in, share this with your group. We would love to spend some time with you guys. And then I want to close with this opportunity. Like, we need help. If you know an organization that values law enforcement, if you know groups that care about first responders, share our information. It's the hardest part of a nonprofit is funding. I hate it, but if we don't have the funding, we can't provide the services that we provide. So think about us. If you know of groups that would love to hear from us, I would ask you to share with them, or any speaking opportunities for us, share with us. And that's it. Like, we're done. This is what we're closing at. Melody, you can go ahead and stop the recording.